We met through training, right? Like I remember.
I have a memory of it every day.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a bit. But before that, you reached out through Demoler about. I remember I saw a very specific post about Demoler. Now, can you talk about how you basically got involved with Demoler, like what that project, what that project is about? I saw a post of Demolar, and it was talking about a very specific incident that happened in Mexico, and I'm not a reporter. I comment on things that happen in Mexico. I get asked to comment for a few news agencies on things that happen related to security issues and stuff like that on the border in Mexico. But when I saw the writing that Demolar was doing and how it was keeping everything concise, it didn't seem to have a political slant to it, which is something that is very common in a lot of news agencies that report on Mexico that are U.S. based or are focused on the U.S. market. Mm-hmm. And I saw it and I was like, that's an interesting platform. So I started sharing some of that stuff, and you reached out, hey, thank you, right? Oh, I mean, you're welcome. Keep at it, right? And then you showed up to a training.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I had been following you for quite a while. I had been interested in what you were doing, especially also since you're one of us.
Yeah.
And at that time, it's also doing this kind of work in Mexico gets very complicated. It gets very touchy.
I think you should be more clear about it. Being a reporter of any kind in Mexico is probably, and you can say this clearer than I can, it is the most dangerous place in the world to be reporting on the news.
It's officially been classified as the most dangerous country in the world to be a reporter.
And this is something you're doing, right? So I remember
self-preservation,
right? And I had a few friends that worked in that field here in Tijuana that are not with us anymore. So I remember you reaching out, seeking out some preparation and training related to safety, awareness. It's like, yes, yeah, of course, come, stop by, basically. Mm-hmm. I wasn't fully aware of who you were, but I saw you come to a class motivated and with a lot of people come to some of the classes that I do and I talk about safety awareness, how to not get into bad situations and how to get out of them. Mm-hmm. People sometimes don't have a clear need for some of that, or are not too certain why they're there, but they just want to learn something that they might use one day. You were Batman, you were there to just, I need to learn this because I've been working on this project with these people called Demoler, and I need to keep not only myself safe, but everybody involved with it. Mm-hmm. So to me, that was interesting, coming from somebody that comes from where I come from, like culturally, and also somebody that's involved in a project that is basically, hey, we want to tell the truth and communicate some of the stuff that is happening in Mexico, and we are in danger. Mm-hmm. And I felt insanely motivated by that, as far as like, how can I help? Is basically what the conversation was about. This was a few years back.
Yeah, right? It was.
And then, I offered, like, I get a lot of information. I have a vast network of people across the country and on both sides of the border. So I said, hey, I get all this information all the time, and I'm not too good at analyzing and verifying and cross-referencing, and I don't know if these guys have a political slant or not. Can I offer it to send it to Demolar for them to do something with it? And so you basically became the news source that I would say, this is what I recommend.
Appreciate that.
I do nothing but just point towards you guys. Demolar starts growing, like, amazingly. It's not me. It's the work you're doing, the consistency, the clarity, the honesty, the specific reporting on conflicts in certain regions the analyzing information that is coming from government sources as far as death, violence, and all of these things coming out of Mexico. The page starts growing. I've been involved in a few conversations with members of the Senate, Congress, and I've seen Demoler being utilized as a source or a reference for some of the things that I heard in some of these hearings and some of these meetings with law enforcement, which I also talk to and work with every now and then. So I started I remember I know them. Started seeing you pop up in different places like that.
It's amazing.
It's amazing how it's been growing and how it's been constantly being referenced as a valid, powerful news source that doesn't seem to have a slant. It's like an interesting offering out there in social media. What can you explain to us? Like, what is Demoler? Like, first off, the word Demoler. Where does that come from?
Yeah, Demoler. It comes from a band called Los Psychos. It's known to be, or believed to be, the first punk band.
It is the first. It's the first. Yeah, it is the first band. We're gonna put some of the audio, in there. People listen to that. The time frame and everything. This is pre UK punk. This is pre everything, even American stuff.
And they're Latin.
Latin. So they have a song.
Demoler.
What does that song talk about?
It talks about breaking down a railroad, which is representing for, I think, this, the state, breaking down the authority, and in very much, Demoler is a product of that. It is a product of kind of the youth that we all grew up in.
Yeah.
Kind of also that we many times we feel that the state doesn't represent us. What they say publicly doesn't represent us.
Yeah. For me as a Mexican, and also somebody who grew up here and went through all this, I would see news related to Latin America, related specifically to Mexico on the U.S. side, and I wouldn't recognize it as my voice or as something that I would agree with, or as something that I would verify.
Yeah.
So are you saying that I think Demoler represents working against that concept that a lot of us Mexican and or people that migrate to the U.S. or children of immigrants, that we hear about Mexico through conventional, traditional news sources, or even some online ones that are not that conventional, but they seem to be detached. So
very much so.
When I saw Demoler, I was like, oh, they're working against that actively.
Yeah, absolutely. We, in its very primal state, it's an effort of deconstructing and exploring also the narrative that we've been fed this entire time. I think when it comes also to international news sources, there is the idea that, Mexico is just Mexico as a whole. You can't talk about the crime and the violence if you want to promote the tourism. They're almost like, intrinsically linked to each other, when it's like, no, Mexico is not a monolith. Mexico is not just one broad brush. There's detail, there's nuances, and we need to break that apart. We need to understand that independently. It could still be a very beautiful tourist destination, but there are still undeniable things that are happening here, and we're allowed to talk about those. We should talk about both.
And not in a generalized fashion. Like, you hear this all the time in the news. Cartels, cartel violence, cartel this, cartel that. Like, it's one big single glob of people. And we're
all cartel members. We're all narcos.
Yeah. Or then you hear the whole aspect of travel advisories to Mexico. Although there's some parts of Mexico that are actually safer than most major American cities, which is there's no travel advisories to Detroit, for example, or Chicago. But the whole aspect of actually breaking down Mexico, not just by regions, but also by criminal organizations, trends. Demoler has been very good about piecing that out for their audience and kind of like explaining what is going on, who's involved, and not only is it like, could you divide up? I mean, is it like the divide, what Demolar is doing, or what it's specifically focused on covering as far as coming out of Mexico. Can you kind of
Yeah,
explain
absolutely.
what that
We
is?
focus on crime, conflict, and corruption. And we feel that those are three of the most, once you start exploring those, you learn so much about the violence in Mexico. You learn how intertwined politics is with the violence, with kind of the narco state that we're experiencing right now.